Hello, everybody. On behalf of the Highland Park Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to Library in Your Living Room. We are pleased to present Shelf Isolation, a weekly mini-series about what to read, watch, and play next. I'm Catherine, and this is your Information and Reader Services Department. And we'll start with Nancy tonight.
Hello, I'm Nancy. I'm the archivist, but I read books sometimes too. And I was reading an article, I think it was an interview with Christian Hanna, the very popular author, about her new book, which takes place in the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. And she gave a shout out to an author named Sanora Babb, with whom I'm not familiar. Now, she mentioned that Sonora's book had been accepted. She'd received an advance. At the same time, someone else's book went to the publisher and had been released. And that is this book by John Steinbeck. And it also turns out that Miss Babb had given her notes. She was a volunteer at the camps that are discussed in both these books, in Steinbeck's The Grape of Wrath, to Tom Collins, and Tom Collins gave them to John Steinbeck. So you have this very interesting, we have two very prominent publishers in the United States have this book. Steinbeck's book gets out first, so Sanora Babb's book got held until 2004. And she always said that her book was better. And so I thought, well, I'm going to check this out. And so I checked it out, and it is better. And this is with the fact that I still have Steinbeck's Grape of Wrath on my shelf from college, indicates that I really thought it was an excellent book. So, but it seems he had a lot more help, and all writers use help from researchers, from archives and other places. But Sanora Babb has this really marvelous work, and it's also written from a woman's point of view about things like pregnancy and children. So I found that very enlightening, and it's really a very good book. And since I was not familiar with Ms. Babb, I kind of looked her up and read about her, and she had a very interesting life. She was born in the Dust Bowl. Her family moved with other Okies west. She fell in love with, married a Chinese man, an Oscar-winning cinematographer, but their marriage was not recognized until 1948 because she was white and he was Chinese. And his family was very traditional. He would not live with her, even though they were technically married, until the state of California allowed their marriage to be official in 1948. So I highly recommend this book by Sanora Babb, whose names are unknown. And also I'm going to share a few things from the archives, as I always like to do, in this case from Ravinia. Where are we? Okay, there we are. Now, Ravinia, as you know, was closed this year, and is new music director, and it's not the first time it's gone through changes. After its first few years of being owned by the Electric Railway, which closed in 1964, there was an economic crisis, and Highland Park was taken over by citizens. Now, this lasted again only through the Depression, but it turns out one of the first meetings they had about this was at our library, which they referred to as the Carberry Library. And I think this is 1908. Even though it says Highland Park's been operated for the past 6 years, because I did find some articles indicating this whole issue with Judge Groscoop was going to sell Ravinia to the highest bidder, and the North Shore citizens, and their meetings not just in Highland Park, but in Wilmette and Lake Forest, was aghast that it might become like Coney Island instead of high class. So they started the subscription service, which lasted through 1930. In addition to this press release, we also have lists of donors, and there you see the familiar names Eckstein and Mr. Rosenwald, who gave significant funds to make sure Ravinia stayed open, and it also offered classical music, which led to what's called the Golden Age of Opera, of which we've shared so many programs here and are available now on the Illinois Digital Archive and will be available on the DPLA. So I think that's really kind of a fun, marvelous thing. And speaking of music, I'll do a lot of music on Hoopla. I really enjoy Hoopla, but sometimes even with something like they don't have the liner notes, and you hear something and you really want to know who's playing that. Because I was listening to Saint-Saens, a disc by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and the Paris Orchestra. And I just thought one of the players on the famous Danse macabre, the violin soloist, was so spectacular. I thought, well, who is that? But you're not going to find that from Hoopla. I discovered a new website called, it's not new, it's something new for me. It's called Jaxta. And the violinist was Alain Moya, a French violinist. So, because it gives official music credit. So if you're looking at something in Hoopla or someplace else and you just have to know who's playing that organ, that violin, who's conducting, what orchestra is it, this is a kind of a fun site to use, Jaxta. And so I encourage everyone to do that when they're watching Hoopla and they don't have liner notes. And with that, I'll pass it off to Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. So the first thing I'm going to share tonight is actually a repeat, because this is something that William recommended back in maybe April, but it is the game Wingspan. So this is a really fun game. I heard about it from William when he recommended it on this very show. It's a board game where you basically build the best bird sanctuary. That's the object of the game. And it's a card-based game. And you have all these, I don't know if I can get it so that you can see it well, all these beautiful bird cards. So really just the look of the game is a large part of the appeal. But we got the game. It has a little bit of a learning curve. Fortunately, there are a lot of YouTube videos and such online to walk you through how to actually play the game. But once you figure it out and get going, it's a lot of fun. It's a game that takes about an hour to play, which makes it perfect for playing after dinner on a night like tonight, where I'm going to be procrastinating on going out and shoveling out of the blizzard that is going on right outside the window as I speak. So I just wanted to bring that back and say, I tried a recommendation from the show and it was great. So thank you, William, for that. The other thing I want to talk about is a book called The Darkest Child by Dolores Phillips. This is a book that I think first came out about 15 years ago, and then about 5 years ago got a new edition. Dolores Phillips was a nurse who worked in a state psychiatric hospital in Georgia. That was her main job. And I think she published a few short stories, but this is the only novel that she published. I don't know that she really participated in a lot of public life as a writer. So I don't know a lot about her, but I'm really curious to know, because this book, I'm almost done with it, and it is amazingly good. It's set in Georgia in the late 1950s, and its main character is a girl named Tangi May, who is, I think, 7th out of 10 children. She comes from a Black family led by a single mother, and it's just a wonderful book about this girl who faces a myriad problems and just all the different types of problems that she has. Her mother is not really the best mother. She supports the family working as a prostitute. She's not entirely sane. At the same time, they're living in the Jim Crow era, and so there are these problems in the community, and tensions are starting to run higher as some people are agitating for greater rights. And she also has, just typical 13, 14-year-old girl problems, like her friend, it turns out, likes to hanging out with her sister more than she likes Tangi May. And, just the sadness that comes in there. I don't know that there are really any, I don't want to say that there aren't any good characters in this. It's a book that's not so much about good and bad people as it just is about people with all their flaws, and yet just so human and understandable. And so that's what I really love about it. I'm actually listening to the audiobook, which I do not think is available through CCS, but is wonderfully read and has an introduction by Tiari Jones. And, if you're really interested, I think you can get it on Audible, or, you could also contact us about the possibility of interlibrary loan. It really is a great audiobook. It would be great in print as well. So that is The Darkest Child by Dolores Phillips. And from there, I will hand it over to Karen.
Thanks, Catherine. Speaking of going back to past shows for recommendations, I don't remember who it was who talked about a book by Kaz Frear, but it was in episode 13. I got as far as finding that out. And the book that was discussed was Stone Cold Heart, which is the second in her series about a young detective. And I didn't go back and watch the episode to see who talked about it. But anyway, I must have written it down because the name Kaz Frear was in my head. And I read a book called Sweet Little Lies, which is the first book in a series about Kat Kintala, who is a young detective in London. And I was hoping this would be another female detective that would be as witty and smart as Manon Bradshaw in the Susie Steiner series that I also discussed. So anyway, on the back of this book, it does say that a Kirkus review says she is on par with Susie Steiner's and Tana French's female detectives. So I thought, well, this is worth it. And it was worth a try. It was really worth reading. This detective, Kat is only 26 and she's in the London detective. And the book uses some flashbacks to go back 18 years in the past when her family took a trip to Ireland for a few weeks. And she was 8, and her sister, I think, was maybe 13. And there was a young woman they met, and she was a little older at the time. But while the family was visiting their grandmother in Ireland, this girl, this young 17-year-old disappeared. And Kat suspects her father at least knows something about it and maybe was involved, has lied about it, she thinks. And remember, she's 8 years old. She's seen them talking and she's overheard bits of their conversation and she starts to form some conclusions. But anyway, the woman, it's a mystery. Woman isn't found until 18 years later. She turns up murdered in London. She's been living under a different name. And Kat gets assigned to the case, which puts her in a really awkward spot because she has a little bit of a connection to this victim, but she successfully hides her past from her colleagues. So they have no idea she ever was acquainted with the murder victim. But this is a story of a crime, but more than that, I think it's like a psychological story about the conflict the main character experiences as she struggles with her father and her changing perception of whether he's guilty, whether he has anything to do with this crime or what he's doing now. She just has a real hard time with that, but everything gets solved in the end. So I have the next book checked out and hoping to start that in the next few days. But also, I talked about Babylon Berlin a few weeks ago, and I then put the second book in the series, Silent Death, on hold in Libby, so I could read it as an ebook. And it came, but then it wouldn't go to my Kindle. I didn't realize it was not a Kindle format book, so I had to read it on my phone, or that's what I thought I would try. And I've said before, this is a great way of passing the time if you're waiting in line. And so I was at the post office waiting in line and pull it out, and you get right into this. The characters, it kind of, the book, it seems to begin in a similar way that the first book did. Just kind of drops you into a scene, and then you hear, or the detective starts to appear, and he starts to talk. And so the funny thing is, the woman he was involved with in the last book is nowhere to be seen so far. So I got about 5 minutes into it, and then I ordered a pizza one night, and I had to wait for it. Got 10 more minutes read, and then this weekend, the book came in for me. So this, I think, will be easier to handle. Another, 400 some pager. But I was having trouble with the phone. I really like the Kindle better. But anyway, let's see. So I don't have much to say about this yet, but I'm hoping it's as good as the first book. So that's all from me for this week. And next we'll hear from Will.
Thank you, Karen. My partner and I got excited when Netflix announced and then quickly released season 2 of their reality competition, Blown Away. It's a glassblowing competition where glassblowers of varying experience levels compete for a $60,000 package that includes an artist residency at the Corning Museum of Glass. I remember us watching the first episode of the first season on a lark, and we ended up binging the entire the series in one sitting. Now, Glass One isn't something I've given a second thought to, but this show does an amazing job of framing both the physical exertion that's needed to make even the smallest glass piece, as well as the amount of creativity that goes into bending the molten glass to best achieve whatever prompt is given by the judge in a given episode. Yet I have to say we were left with a slightly bitter taste after we finished the first couple of episodes of season 2, because there seemed to be more of a focus on the skill than the prompt, which drastically skewed the end result. At one point, one of the contestants, due to the fact that he was a 40 plus year veteran of glass blowing, just comes out and says that he's not going to follow the prompt because, and I quote, Chris Taylor does not do cartooning. And that's fine. Where it becomes a problem is when he presents a piece that is very well done, extremely well done, but has nothing to do with the guidelines they were given. And instead, someone else who produced the results, while not as well done, fit the criteria of what the judge actually asked for. It wasn't enough to stop us from watching the series, but it did leave a somewhat bitter taste. Now, if you don't have Netflix, consider putting one of our Roku streaming devices on hold. They come loaded with it, and along with a variety of other streaming options. On the subject of streaming, the other thing we've been watching is the YouTube series Technology Connections by Alec Watson. We first caught wind of it a couple of weeks ago after a video he posted about using the dishwasher incorrectly went slightly viral. As a note, dishwashing pods function contrary to the design of a dishwasher by not providing soap for the first rinse. Either use powder or gel or drop an extra pod in there. The rest of his channel is not as game changing, but just as interesting. Whether it's the inner working of air conditioning and heaters, and why space heaters generally heat the same area despite wild variations in pricing, the history of home entertainment design for people like my parents who jumped in on the Laserdisc wave. He has a 5-part series explaining how it was both ahead of its time and far too late, or showing how much kitchen appliance design has actually regressed. Between the hands-free antique toaster and the mid 90s microwave complete with recipes, I feel slightly cheated. There are plenty of interesting anecdotes about the various devices that we easily take for granted. And with that, I will pass it on to Laurie.
Thanks, William. So this past week, I have been reading a book that the library's comic book club, is that right? Comic book club read this past month. The comic book club meets the first Thursday of every month. And this last month they read Nat Turner by Kyle Baker. And I did not get it until after, or maybe the day of, and I didn't read it. I just started reading it this weekend. I did not know anything about Nat Turner, but in learning about, except something about a slave rebellion. So it's really compelling. He uses the text from what is it? He uses the text from Nat Turner's, is it the Confessions of Nat Turner? Yeah, thank you. The Confessions of Nat Turner and his own illustrations, which are really, they're black and white. They're really, like I said, they're very compelling. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm really learning something from it. So I'm glad, even though I missed the discussion, I'm glad I picked it up. I'm sorry I missed the discussion. And the next one is on April, they're reading Astro Boy, and it is on March 4th. Thank you. It is on March 4th at 7:30. So Astro Boy, which is available on Hoopla, or you probably could get a book also. So that is one thing I've been reading. And then I've been listening to Frederick Bachmann's book, his newest book, Anxious People. And it is, I really like Frederick Bachmann, you know, A Man Called Uwe, and My Grandmother Wants Me to Tell You She's Sorry. I like his quirky characters. I heard him speak once at Book Expo, and he's really a funny speaker. And he really likes libraries, so that endears him to me. But anyway, but I started this book, and I, like I said, I've been listening to it, and I was ready to stop because I didn't like the narrator. I didn't like the way she did some of the voices. And I thought that actually instead of Anxious People, it should have been called Irritating People, because all the characters were very irritating. And, but I stuck with it. And some of you may know that I generally don't stick with things. I'm kind of feel like I've reached the age where if I don't like it, it's okay to put it down and move on to something else. But now I'm almost finished with it. And I do have to say that, you know, he worked his magic with at a certain point in the middle, you know, when you figure out what is going on, you know, I'm really enjoying it. Although I do have to say the narrator, not my favorite narrator, but she's still okay, not quite as irritating. And the people aren't either. So I recommend that also.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, your interlibrary loan coordinator from the Highland Park Public Library. And guess what? I'm here to talk to you about murder. I read 2 books this week. The first one is The House of Corrections by Nikki French. The story is written by a husband and wife team who they're behind this very successful Frida Kahlo mysteries, which I do recommend those too. Be sure to read them in order because you have to, otherwise you won't be able to follow the stories throughout. This book, however, is a standalone book, and it's about the character is Tabitha. She finds herself in prison awaiting trial for murder. Tabitha feels as though she's in a dream and is having a difficult time recalling, you know, what is real, what is fact, what is fiction. She cannot basically remember anything. She cannot fill in the blanks of why she is there. All she knows is that when the police came, they found a man murdered in her shed, and she was covered in his blood. The only things that she knows, because like I said, she can't remember anything, is that what the police have told her. She does know who the man is. He was her former math teacher when she was in school. She's just recently moved back to this village, and she's restoring a home, and this man happens to live next door to her. So the story moves, I will say, at a snail's pace, and it doesn't really pick up until Tabitha, luckily, which is about a third of the way into the book, meets with her lawyer. Now, the lawyer doesn't believe her story and pretty much thinks that she's guilty because all the evidence points towards her having done this. So the lawyer tells her to plead guilty. Well, Tabitha decides, I'm not going to do this because I know there's no way that I did this. Maybe I can't remember what happened, but I would not murder somebody. So she, with the help of her cellmate slash friend, Michaela, they decide to start piecing things together. Now, Tabitha's not a really likable person. She is very, very petite, very feisty, and has an incredible hot temper. Like she'll go off like that on anything. So, you know, people don't really like talking with her. And she also uses a lot of profanity with her outburst. But she and Michaela slowly start piecing together things, and they realize that right away the police just decided she was guilty. They didn't really look into anybody else as somebody who may have been responsible for this murder. So luckily, it's in London. There's lots of CCTV. So she starts kind of looking at things, and as different memories are coming back, and she's watching the film and stuff, she starts remembering different things. So she's able to put together a case and represent herself in court. Now, the courtroom antics, they kind of go back and forth. I will say that she doesn't seem to follow the law or courtroom etiquette, we'll put it that way. It's very entertaining, this part. And she realizes no matter the outcome, some people are always going to think of her as being guilty. So maybe she is guilty, maybe she's not. You really don't know that what really happened until the very end of the story. So it's well worth it. Just stick to it and you will enjoy it. Now, the second book I loved. It's The Sanatorium by Sarah Pierce. And this is her debut novel. It's a gothic psychological thriller set in the snowy Swiss Alps. The Sanatorium is now a Stark exclusive hotel. Its prior history was it was a tuberculosis sanatorium. And there's still like a lot of spirits and mystery about this hotel. A lot of the locals protested it being turned into a hotel because they really felt like bad things had happened there when it was a sanatorium. So the hotel is the brainchild of Lucas Cannon, a very wealthy young man who spent a lot of his life in hospitals as a child. So he kind of is an outdoors type person. This is set really remotely in the Swiss Alps, as I say. And the story begins 4 years prior when the lead architect notices as he's leaving from the sanatorium for the day, after drawing up plans and things, he sees this little tiny bracelet on the ground by his car, and he bends down to pick it up, and something grabs his ankle. And we don't know what happens to him. 4 years later, the hotel opens, and it's present day, but little does anyone know, somebody else has just disappeared. It's an employee at the hotel. She's leaving for her shift, so everyone's just assuming she's gone home. She's trying to get home to say goodbye to her son, who's going to be with her ex-partner for the weekend. And so she goes out the back employee and exit, and guess what? There's a small bracelet on the ground. She bends down to look at it, but she gets the sense that I need to run. Something's going on. So she takes off running through the woods. Just say she didn't get away. And she's kind of held someplace. We don't know where, but obviously it's somewhere near the hotel. So the story goes back and forth between this employee that's missing and between our narrator, the story who is Ellen, a detective on leave from London, and her boyfriend Will have come to the hotel to celebrate her estranged brother Isaac and his fiancee Laura's engagement. Ellen really doesn't want to be there. She's feeling like claustrophobic just from taking the funicular up to the hotel. And then they have to get in a shuttle from that. And things just don't seem right to her. But she's trying to put her best foot forward. And with the help of her boyfriend, Will, she's trying, to put on a brave face. So anyway, they get to the hotel. And Ellen doesn't like the feel of it at all. There's just, it's just very stark, very cold. There's just these glass windows. You just feel like somebody's watching you at all times. It's like you can see out, but you can't see anything. You just see the mountains and the snow, but you feel like somebody can see whatever it is that you're doing. So, like I said, Ellen is on leave from her job as a detective. She was involved in an incident that nearly killed her with an assailant. So she's been about 6 months and she's not sure if she wants to go back to work. She's pretty much kind of lost. But another huge part of Ellen's life was the death of her brother Sam when they were kids. It's kind of basically formed the way that she is. She's a very guarded person. She doesn't trust a lot of things. She has very much like things have to go a certain way, and only that way. She hardly ever bends the rules or goes out of her comfort zone at all. The big thing is that she believes that her brother Isaac killed their brother Sam. And she's decided that at some point during this weekend, she's going to confront him about this. Now, Will doesn't know what she thinks about that. She believes that her brother has murdered her brother Sam. So he has no idea about this, that Ellen's held us back from him. So like I said, the death has haunted her entire life. And so before she can confront the brother, though, more things happen. Laura, the fiance, disappears. Now, Ellen, who's thinking she probably doesn't want to become a detective, all of a sudden her detective instincts kick in, and she starts to piece together what has happened to Laura. She's speaking with her brother Isaac, who is acting very strange. She's in their hotel room, and Laura and Isaac's room. And as she's talking to her brother, she looks down and she sees a little bit of blood on the bathroom rug. So she's thinking, did my brother have some kind of violent outburst? Did he hurt her or something? You know, she tries to ask him this. And in the meantime, she also notices grabbing something and putting it in his pocket quickly. When she asks him, you know, are you sure something didn't happen, that maybe you guys had a fight and that she's gone? And he just blows up at her, which is how he's always been. Like, he just is very volatile and stuff, and says, you know, how can you accuse me of this, blah, 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 you know. And she's like, okay, you know, how am I going to get out of this situation? So as she's digging into this and trying to piece together what has happened to Laura, she kind of discovers that Laura has some secrets too. There's a cell phone that no one knew about that she had, and there's all these numbers on it. And so as Ellen continues trying to piece things together and tries to, you know, talks to different employees and stuff, she can feel that she's not getting the whole story. And on top of that, she knows that somebody is watching her. But every time she tries to find out who it is or where they're at, like, she's not afraid to open the door and see, there's no one there. So I will say that the story is incredibly creepy, and you are cringing every time she opens the door, goes around a corner or something. You're like, oh my God, you know what's going to happen. And it's like, it's just like such a great story. I mean, it keeps you on the edge of your seat. And the ending, all I have to say is be like Ellen and go with your gut instinct. I highly recommend this debut novel. That you just will really, really, really leave you just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks.
That's it for today, everyone. As always, please remember that we are all here for you. We are available for comments, questions, or concerns that you may have. Visit our website at hplibrary.org to find the various ways to contact us. Because the library's hours and services can change suddenly due to COVID or the weather, like today, while we're in the winter season, it is best to contact us via email or chat on our website before coming to the library. Our music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod. You can find more information about this and the titles we mentioned in our show notes below. Okay, this is us signing off. Until we see you next, stay safe.